The engine purred like a well-fed predator as I rolled down the long, curved driveway of the Mitchell estate. The British racing green Aston Martin Vantage caught every stray glint of afternoon light, polished to the kind of shine you don't just notice, you remember. I didn't look back until the iron gate opened. And there he was. Ryan stood frozen at the edge of the circular driveway, one hand limp at his side, the other gripping a thick envelope, my divorce papers, freshly delivered. For a second, it was like we were back at the altar. Me in white. Him smiling like he'd just won the lottery. Except now, there was no smile. Just disbelief. Like he couldn't fathom the idea that I'd be the one to walk away, and worse, do it in the car he'd dreamed of owning since college. Funny thing about dreams. They change once you realize who you are. You ever had a moment like that? When someone thinks they've beaten you, but every card in the game is quietly stacked in your hand? This was mine. And the most satisfying part? I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I didn't beg. I just left. Quietly. Powerfully. In the driver's seat of something I owned. Something he'd only ever wanted. When Ryan called me worthless at dinner last week, he probably thought it was the final blow. He had no idea it was the last thing he'd ever get to say to me without a lawyer present. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this all started, long before the car, the fight, or the papers. It began with a smile that seemed genuine. And a woman who thought love would be enough to survive anything. Before we jump in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I didn't come from money. Not the kind you whisper about at country clubs or hide in offshore accounts. My parents were honest, hard-working people. My dad built houses with his hands until his back gave out. My mom stitched lives together in the ER, night after night, raising me on caffeine and compassion. We lived in a modest home just outside Seattle, faded siding, a squeaky screen door, and a yard that bloomed every spring whether we could afford mulch or not. I was the first in my family to go to college. Scholarships, student loans, 3 jobs at once, I clawed my way into the tech world because no one was going to hand me a seat at the table. I started in sales. Entry level. Making cold calls in cheap heels and second-hand blazers. But I had a gift, not for selling, but for spotting patterns. Trends. I could see shifts in the market before they happened. By 29, I'd turned a few lucky breaks and a truckload of discipline into something real. My first angel investment hit big, and I didn't stop there. By 32, I wasn't just the girl from the wrong side of town. I was a name. Not a famous one, but whispered in the right circles. The kind of name that got invited to pitch nights and panels. The kind of name that drew curious glances when it showed up alone and unafraid. I didn't have a trust fund, but I had a portfolio. I didn't have a fancy last name, but I had equity. And for a while, I thought that was enough. Then I met Ryan Mitchell. He had the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. Slick pitch deck. Polished voice. A jawline sculpted by privilege and protein shakes. He was pitching a lifestyle app, forgettable, honestly, but I remembered his smile. He remembered my name. He wasn't like the others. At least, that's what I told myself when he leaned in across the rooftop bar and said, "You see things other people miss, don't you?" I should have known then that he was talking about himself. We dated for 18 months. I met his family early. Patricia Mitchell was the type of woman who smelled like antique furniture and judgment. Walter Mitchell, her husband, spoke in monologues about legacy and bloodlines as if he were narrating a Ken Burns documentary about himself. And Ryan's siblings, well, let's just say their hobbies included polo, private schools, and passive-aggressive brunches. They never said it outright. But it was clear. I was an outsider. The woman who had built her own world, but still wasn't welcome in theirs. And yet, I married him. Because love makes you believe you can change the temperature of a room just by standing in it. Because I thought I was being invited in. Instead, I'd just been allowed to linger near the door. And for years, I stayed there. Smiling. Nodding. Swallowing their backhanded compliments and biting my tongue at the suggestions Patricia made about how a Mitchell wife should behave. I thought I was keeping the peace. Turns out, I was losing myself. And I didn't even notice, until the night everything cracked open. Do you know what that feels like? When the truth doesn't scream, but taps you on the shoulder, and suddenly, everything looks different? That moment was coming. And once it arrived, there'd be no going back. It started small. That's the thing about fractures, they don't announce themselves with fireworks. They slip in quietly, almost politely, like a draft under a door you didn't know was open. At dinners, Ryan stopped introducing me by my name. I became my wife or Jessica, she works in investments or something. That or something stung more than I admitted. Especially when I knew he used my advice in half the pitches he gave his board. At family events, he'd correct my posture, my choice of words, my stories. Don't mention the trailer park your cousin lived in, Jess. It's not the vibe. Maybe don't bring up your latest startup. My dad thinks crypto's a joke. He said it was about presentation. About fitting in. But what he really meant was, don't make them uncomfortable by being who you really are. Every year, the Mitchells held this awful tradition, the annual review dinner. Yes, they actually called it that. Each member of the family was expected to report on their accomplishments that year. It was like a boardroom disguised as a dining table. Patricia sat at the head like a CEO in pearls, passing judgment with a raised eyebrow and an occasional smile that never reached her eyes. I endured 3 of those dinners. Smiled through the polite dismissals, the veiled digs, the passive-aggressive compliments. One year, I mentioned a company I'd backed that went public. Walter responded with, impressive. Of course, some people just have a knack for luck. The cracks deepened when Ryan's app tanked. It wasn't sudden, just a slow unraveling of bad decisions, poor leadership, and a refusal to listen to feedback. When he lost out on a promotion he thought was guaranteed, he spiraled. Late nights. Longer silences. Whiskey that lingered on his breath. Lipstick on his collar that didn't belong to me. I found the first clue by accident. An Uber receipt on our shared email, 2 a.m., from an address I didn't recognize. I didn't confront him immediately. I waited. I observed. The perfume on his scarf. The late-night work dinners that ended with his phone on airplane mode. Then, one night, I opened his laptop. I wasn't proud of it. But something inside me needed the truth spelled out in a language I couldn't excuse anymore. And there it was. A folder of photos. Him and a woman named Amber, young, glossy, just out of a marketing degree. Rooftop cocktails. Weekend getaways. A note in one image that read, "You make me feel seen." I never felt that with her. Her. That's who I was now. Not Jessica. Not the woman who loaned him over $400,000 to save his company. Not the one who supported him through every late-night pitch and crushing setback. Just her. An obstacle to his new narrative. I stared at the screen for a long time. My hands didn't shake. My breath didn't catch. What I felt was colder. Clearer. I didn't cry that night. I didn't scream. I just sat there, in the quiet glow of betrayal, and began writing a different story. One where I wasn't a footnote in a man's resume. One where I took the wheel, and drove. It was a Thursday when Patricia sent the invitation. Well, not an invitation, more like a summons. Dinner at Kiyomi, 7 p.m. Family only. Wear navy or black. That was her style. No please, no thank you. Just expectations disguised as commands. Kiyomi was their favorite spot, one of those rooftop places with velvet booths and plates so small they made you feel like a giant. Ryan didn't even mention it. I found out because Patricia had CC'd him in the message. I replied with a polite confirmed, then stared at the screen for a long while. I knew Amber would be there. I knew they were testing me. That night, I wore red. Not firetruck red, not some flashy crimson. Deep, elegant burgundy. Silk. Backless. A soft rebellion stitched into every seam. I arrived 5 minutes early, heels clicking against marble, and told the host my name. His smile faltered. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Mitchell." That private room was reserved by Mrs. Patricia Mitchell. She specified that only guests arriving with Mr. Ryan Mitchell would be allowed entrance. My stomach didn't drop. My pride did not bleed. Instead, I smiled. "No worries. I'll sit at the bar." The bartender nodded when I waved. I ordered a Manhattan, neat, and crossed my legs like a woman with nowhere to be, and all the time in the world. That's when I heard the voice. "Jessica Harmon? I haven't seen you since the Vestige Labs deal." I turned. Marcus Torres. We'd met 5 years ago when he was trying to raise capital for an AI company that eventually got acquired. I had passed on the investment, but not because of him. He was smart. Sharp. Just too early. Now, he looked like a man who had made all the right choices since. "Well," I smiled, "I guess you made it after all." He grinned. "Barely. Turns out selling the company wasn't the dream, selling cars to the people who bought the company? That's where the fun is." I laughed. "What kind of cars?" He raised an eyebrow. "Aston Martins. Bentleys. Anything that sounds expensive and drives like a fantasy." I sipped my drink. "Ever have a British racing green Vantage come through?" His grin widened. "Funny you ask. One just arrived this morning." Of course it did. "Let me guess," I said, "someone already claimed it?" He leaned in, playful. "Not yet. You interested?" Before I could answer, Patricia's perfume hit the air. Sweet, powdery, calculated. She stood behind Marcus with that trademark tilt of her head, half greeting, half dissection. "Jessica. We weren't expecting you to dine alone. You should have said something. We would have made arrangements." Translation: You weren't supposed to come unless you had Ryan on your arm. "I'm good here," I said, tapping the rim of my glass. "Your private room looked a little crowded anyway." Her eyes flicked to my dress, lingered. "Well," she said, lips thin, red. "That's a choice." "It is," I replied, "and a good one, I think." Marcus glanced between us. "Patricia, nice to see you again. Still driving the Rolls?" She blinked, clearly thrown off. "You two know each other?" "We go way back," Marcus said smoothly. "Jessica actually passed on investing in my first company. Smart move, in hindsight. Now she just buys the cars." Patricia's mouth tightened. "Jessica doesn't drive much, actually." Marcus chuckled. "Well, then maybe it's time she started." She turned on her heel without another word. The sound of her stilettos retreating was more satisfying than the cocktail. Marcus raised his glass. "To new beginnings." I clinked mine against his. "To driving fast and letting go." That night, I didn't go home angry. I went home awake. The mask had slipped. The room had spoken. And tomorrow, I was going to test drive the dream car of the man who once told me I was nothing. Not to spite him. To remember who I was, before they tried to rewrite me. The house was dark when I got back. Ryan wasn't home yet, which was just as well. I poured myself a glass of water and walked through each room slowly, like I was seeing it for the first time, and for the last. We'd bought this place 3 years ago. Well, I bought it. He picked it. Hardwood floors, open concept, oversized kitchen island he never used. It was everything he wanted people to think he owned. When Ryan finally came through the door, it was with a storm behind his eyes. "You embarrassed me tonight." I didn't even look up. Did I? You ignored my family. You made a scene at the bar. Patricia said Marcus Torres was flirting with you. I turned slowly, holding his gaze. So what if he was? He froze. That wasn't the version of me he was used to. He threw his coat onto the sofa. Do you have any idea how this makes me look? Like a man who's losing control, I said quietly. His eyes narrowed. Don't push me, Jess. I stepped closer. Or what? You'll cheat again? Gaslight me? Or tell me I should be grateful to be part of your perfect little legacy? That did it. He exploded. You think you're better than me because you made some lucky bets? You think any of this means anything without me? Without my name, my family? I didn't flinch. I'd heard versions of this rant before, smaller, sneakier. This was just louder. Then came the line that broke it all open. You're nothing without me. You're just some nobody from the suburbs who got lucky. Without me, you're worthless. That word hung in the air like smoke. Worthless. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I walked past him into my office, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out the folder I'd been preparing for weeks. Loan documents. Bank transfers. Emails. I walked back and laid it on the table between us. $435,800, I said. That's how much I've loaned you over the past 4 years. Not counting the mortgage on this house, because it's in my name. Not yours. He looked down, his face pale. You said I was worthless, I continued. But I paid for your second chance. I kept your company afloat. I even paid off your damn credit card when you took Amber to Napa. His head shot up. Oh yeah. I know. He tried to speak, but I cut him off. I froze our joint accounts this morning. Linda, my lawyer, is drafting the paperwork. You'll get served by end of week. Maybe sooner. You're serious, he whispered. I smiled. More serious than I've ever been. He started pacing, hands on his head. You don't get to do this. My family will survive, I said. They're Mitchells, remember? Built to withstand scandal and disappointment. He knocked over a vase, our wedding gift from Patricia, and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the picture frames rattled. I exhaled. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't fear. It was relief. The kind that settles into your bones and says, finally. I walked back into my office, opened my phone, and typed a message to Marcus. I want to see the green Vantage. First thing tomorrow. His reply came seconds later. It's waiting for you. And for the first time in a long time. I was, too. The next morning, the sky was a soft gray, the kind that made Seattle feel like a secret. I dressed deliberately. Black blazer, crisp white shirt, jeans tailored just enough to say I meant business. No makeup beyond a sharp line of eyeliner and a berry-colored lip. I was done trying to look like someone's idea of appropriate. Torres luxury automobile sat on the edge of the city like a modern temple, glass walls, marble floors, polished steel. But none of that mattered when I saw the car. It sat in the center of the showroom, gleaming under the soft lights. British racing green. Leather seats in warm chestnut. Lines that whispered speed, elegance, defiance. Marcus met me beside it, holding the keys like he was offering more than just horsepower. I figured you'd come. I barely slept, I admitted. You don't want to test drive? I walked around the car, hand trailing lightly along the hood. I already know how it'll feel, I said. And besides, I'm not here to flirt with freedom. I'm here to buy it. He didn't try to talk me out of it. Marcus knew the kind of purchase this was. It wasn't about the car. It was about reclaiming the wheel, literally and figuratively. We did the paperwork quickly. No financing. No delay. One wire transfer from my personal investment account and it was mine. As I slid into the driver's seat and started the engine, a quiet thrill surged through me. The kind that doesn't shout, it hums low in your chest like certainty. It drove smoother than I imagined. Like it had been waiting for me. From the dealership, I headed straight to Linda Kim's office. She'd been my lawyer since my first startup equity win. Smart. Ruthless when needed. And she never asked if I was sure, just how fast I wanted to move. You have the prenup, I told her. The loans are documented. I want the papers served before sunset. She nodded. Ryan's going to push back. I hope he does, I said, pulling a USB drive from my bag. I brought receipts. As she reviewed the files, I leaned back in the chair and felt it, that quiet shift when grief turns into resolve. After leaving Linda's, I took a detour. There was one more stop to make. Bellevue. The Mitchell estate. Not to beg. Not to confront. Just to show them what power really looks like when it doesn't need to announce itself. I parked right in front of the grand entrance. Engine running. Door slightly ajar. Moments later, the heavy door opened. Ryan stepped out in a fleece vest, holding his phone, half distracted, until he saw the car. Then he froze. He walked slowly toward me, brows pulled tight. What the hell is this? I smiled through the window. This? I said, stepping out, stilettos kissing the pavement. This is my divorce gift to myself. Before he could respond, a black sedan pulled into the driveway. The process server stepped out with a manila envelope. Ryan Mitchell? Ryan didn't even answer. He just stared at me. At the car. At everything he thought he had, and just lost. Patricia appeared at the door, watching from the threshold like a queen about to witness a siege. I met her gaze. And winked. Then I got back in the car, shifted into drive, and pulled away without looking back. As the gate opened in front of me, the words echoed in my mind, his words. Worthless. No, Ryan. I was never worthless. You just couldn't afford me. The apartment I moved into sat high above Capitol Hill, wrapped in glass and silence. A far cry from the cold marble of the Mitchell estate. I'd bought it 3 months earlier through a holding company, Jessica Harmon LLC. Quietly. Strategically. As if, deep down, I already knew this day would come. When James, the doorman, greeted me with "Welcome home, Ms. Harmon," it wasn't just courtesy. It was recognition. Of my name. My choices. My new beginning. Within hours of arriving, my phone lit up like a siren. 27 missed calls from Ryan. 6 from Patricia. 3 from Vanessa, the sister-in-law who once whispered to me at Christmas, "You clean up well for someone so self-made." I ignored them all. Only one message caught my attention. Marcus. I heard what happened. You okay? I replied. More than okay. But Patricia wasn't one to go quietly. 2 days later, a headline hit the local business journal. Concerns over investor ethics in Seattle's tech circles. Buried beneath a carefully worded editorial was a statement from Walter Mitchell. No names, of course. Just veiled accusations about investors who used personal relationships to access capital and influence decisions. I laughed out loud. They weren't just angry, they were threatened. And when powerful people feel threatened, they try to rewrite the story before it's told honestly. But I was done letting them hold the pen. The next day, I met with one of my biggest clients, Theo Baldwin. He was a legend in the tech space. Silver hair, navy suits, and a laugh like gravel and bourbon. He'd mentored me once, years ago, when I didn't know a cap table from a coffee table. We met at his office overlooking the Sound. He gestured for me to sit and poured 2 glasses of something older than my career. I read the article, he said. I raised an eyebrow. Concerned? He chuckled. About the Mitchells? No. But I am curious. I handed him a folder. Inside were clean documents, timelines, proof of my solo investments, all vetted and above board. He nodded as he flipped through. You've always played the long game. Patricia never liked that. I smirked. She prefers people she can control. She prefers illusions, he said. You broke that for her. We talked business. Growth. The next fund I was launching. He wanted in. No questions asked. As I walked out of his office, my phone buzzed again. Diane Lewis. Seattle Business Journal. Voicemail. Hi Jessica, this is Diane. We're running a follow-up piece and I'd love a comment on your professional response to the recent statements made by Walter Mitchell. You have until end of day before we go to print. I didn't call her back. I had my lawyer do it. Cease and desist. Libel. Defamation. Let them taste their own strategy for once. But the Mitchells weren't done. Not yet. That weekend, I stopped by my old house in Madison Park to pick up the last of my things. It was supposed to be a quick in and out. But something felt off. Dave Ellison, my longtime private security contact, was waiting in the driveway. He'd been reviewing the property since the divorce proceedings began. Front door wasn't tampered with, he said. But the study drawer was left open. And there's a scratch on the safe. I frowned. A break-in? Professional. Quick. Quiet. They were looking for something. What? He shrugged. Documents. Hard drives. Leverage. He didn't say the name. But we both knew who they were. They hadn't just lost a daughter-in-law. They'd lost control. And that made me dangerous. The invitation came in an ivory envelope with gold trim, elegant, heavy, pretentious. Just like her. It was for a charity gala at the Four Seasons, benefiting the Children's Hospital. Patricia was on the hosting committee. Of course she was. She never passed up an opportunity to be applauded for her philanthropy while wearing couture and collecting power like pearls. Attached to the invitation was a handwritten note. Despite recent tensions, I trust you'll behave with the dignity your new circumstances demand. RSVP by Wednesday. There was no RSVP. But I showed up anyway. Not for her. Not even for Ryan. For me. For every woman who'd ever been told she was too much, too ambitious, too loud, too new money. I chose a gown the color of midnight pine, deep emerald, slit high, backless. Understated drama. The kind that walks into a room and doesn't beg to be noticed. It commands it. I wore the diamond earrings I bought after my first 7-figure exit. Not a gift. Not an heirloom. Just mine. When I stepped into the ballroom, I felt the shift instantly. Heads turned. Conversations paused mid-sentence. There she was. Jessica Harmon. No longer a Mitchell. And somehow, more powerful than ever. Patricia spotted me from across the room. Her smile twitched, polite and poisonous. She leaned in to whisper something to Walter, who looked up at me with that stiff expression he reserved for people he couldn't outmaneuver. I made my rounds, spoke to investors, CEOs, and founders, half of whom had never given me more than a nod when I was just Ryan's wife. Now, they asked for meetings. Funny what happens when you stop asking for a seat and build your own table. Later, I found myself at the bar, sipping champagne when I heard the gravelly voice behind me. Jessica. I turned. Walter Mitchell. Up close, he looked smaller. Not physically. But the kind of small that comes when fear shrinks a man from the inside out. Walter, I said, cool as glass. We both know Patricia went too far, he began. The press, the rumors, it wasn't personal. I tilted my head. That's adorable. He blinked. Excuse me? You think she can throw grenades and not get burned? His jaw tightened. I leaned in, voice low and sweet. Tell me, Walter. How are things with those offshore entities? Still routing through the Caymans? Must be exhausting to keep all that quiet during audit season. His face paled. You wouldn't dare. I don't need to. But the IRS doesn't like patterns. And I love patterns. I smiled and walked away. Outside on the rooftop terrace, I found Ryan, drink in hand, tie loosened, eyes heavy with something that looked like regret. He didn't see me at first. When he did, he straightened. You look, he began. I know, I said. We stood in silence for a moment. The city glittered below, unaware. He finally spoke. I shouldn't have said what I said. About you being worthless. No, I replied, you shouldn't have. I didn't mean it. I was angry. I felt small. That's not my fault. He nodded, slowly. Was it really about the car? He asked, glancing over the balcony. Was that your way of hurting me back? I smiled, faintly. No. That car wasn't about you at all. It was about me remembering who I was before you made me feel like less. He swallowed hard. I've lost a lot, he whispered. You've lost what you took for granted, I corrected. That's not the same. As I turned to leave, he reached out. Jess. But I was already gone. Back through the crowd. Past the stairs. Down the stairs to the valet. My Aston Martin purred as it pulled up, sleek and untouchable. I slid in, closed the door, and drove off into the city lights. Behind me, somewhere on that rooftop, Patricia watched through narrowed eyes. And for the first time, she didn't look angry. She looked afraid. The call from Linda came early on a Tuesday morning, just as the sun began slicing through the glass walls of my apartment. They want to meet, she said. Walter and Ryan. Not Patricia. That alone told me everything. I sipped my coffee slowly. Where? My office. Neutral ground. They're ready to negotiate. Of course they are, I said. Now that they'd bled out in public. Linda laughed. You showing up at that gala did more damage than any headline could. They know they lost control of the narrative. Now they just want to minimize the fallout. 2 days later, I walked into Linda's office wearing navy slacks, a silk blouse, and the quiet confidence of someone with nothing left to prove. Walter and Ryan were already seated, stiff and tense. No Patricia. Her absence felt deliberate. Or strategic. Or both. Walter stood first. Extended a hand. Jessica. I shook it, barely. He cleared his throat. We'd like to turn the page. Smooth this out privately. I sat across from them, folded my hands, and waited. Ryan looked rough. Tired. Like a man who'd finally realized how hollow the pedestal he once stood on really was. We've reviewed the loan documents, Walter continued. We're prepared to repay them in full. With interest. No court battles. Good, I said. Because you'd lose. He nodded. There's just one condition, Ryan added, hesitantly. We'd like the car back. I blinked. The car? The Aston Martin, Walter said. It's not about the money. It's symbolic. I let the silence stretch. Then I leaned forward. You're not getting the car. But it represents, Ryan started. I cut him off. It represents freedom. Mine. You can't buy that back. Walter sighed. Then maybe we can include it in the settlement. As a line item. If we agree to retract our statements and issue a formal apology, perhaps. That's when I realized. Patricia didn't know about this meeting. They were here on their own, behind her back, trying to clean up a mess she was too proud to admit she made. I smiled. You want to know the real price of peace? They looked at me, tense. You retract the statements. You issue a public apology. You pay back every dollar, with interest. And in exchange, I give you the car. Ryan looked stunned. You'd really give it back? I shrugged. The car did what it needed to do. It reminded me of who I was. And now, I don't need reminders anymore. Linda leaned in. You'll also sign a non-disparagement clause. Walter nodded. Agreed. The papers were signed that afternoon. As we left the conference room, Ryan lingered behind. She doesn't know we're here, he admitted. Patricia. She's going to be furious. I looked him in the eye. Then maybe, for once, you'll know what it feels like to be afraid of her. He didn't argue. Later that night, Marcus met me at the parking garage. We stood in front of the Aston Martin, his hand brushing mine. You sure you want to let it go? He asked. I exhaled. It's not about keeping everything. It's about choosing what matters now. And then, I handed him the keys. As we walked away together, I didn't look back. Because I wasn't driving in circles anymore. I was done proving anything to anyone. And finally, I was free. Jessica's story is about more than revenge. It's about self-worth rediscovered, and power reclaimed. She didn't need to fight louder. She simply walked away, on her own terms. Have you ever had a moment where you realized your value wasn't up for debate? Tell us in the comments. Comment 2 if this story inspired you. Comment 7 if you think Jessica was too soft on them. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because the next story we're sharing might just feel like your own.